I'm gonna have to go on kind of a rant here. Often hear people say that they're not paying the dealer for this much money to do an oil change, which they think is all the 10,000 mile services or 20,000 mile service. Uh, so you'll see things like, and I see these quite often. Guy will be whining about paying money for tires and having his bike serviced, and you'll see shit like the pulley here will just be rocking back and forth, and of course it'll shear all the damn bolts off and mess the wheel up, and then that guy will be blaming Harley for his wheel making a substandard product because he never checked the sprocket bolts, which is on the checklist for servicing his bike, or engine mounts or anything else. They just change the oil, throw it all in it, think it should run forever. Which would be great if they did. They don't, but check your belt tensions, check your pulley bolts. It takes all less than 5 minutes to check them. Jack the ass end up the wheel bike up and roll the rear wheel and grab a torque wrench and check the torque on them. If any of them are loose, better yet, pull them out of there one at a time. Put fresh Loctite on them and torque them back down. All kinds of crazy stuff goes on. Engine mounts. I had a girl one time. Well, I wasn't there. I was off that weekend, and a girl brought a bike in either Saturday or Sunday and dropped it off and said she had transmission problems. It was on a Softail, I remember that. So I grabbed the work order, and it says on there, suspected transmission rebuild on a late model 5-speed. I don't think so. Or I knew it wasn't. So I get it up on the lift, and I can't even move the damn shift lever. And I disconnected the linkage, and you can move the front, which sometimes stick because people don't ever pull it out of there and clean the rust off of it and re-grease it. And it's moving just as free as could be. But I couldn't move the transmission. I could move the shift lever one way, but it wouldn't move the other way. So I'm standing there looking on the side of the bike, and I just happened to look up. Had the bike on the lift, I just happened to look up, and the rear motor mount bolt's missing. So I was like, shit. I looked down there, stuck a magnet down in there, and moved the shift lever around a little bit, and tink, pulled the rear motor mount bolt. It was wedged up between the shift lever and the primary. Pulled it up, put the motor mount bolt back in, checked all the motor mount bolts all the way around the bike, took it out and rode it, and shift fine, rode fine, all that. Went back to the shop and called the lady up. And I guess whoever she dropped the bike off with, they told her it was going to be like $2,000 or something. So I called her up, and she goes, how much is the bill? That's like 30 or 40 bucks, something like that. It was cheap. And she said, guy told me yesterday it was going to be like $2,000. I said, nope, it's done. It's ready to go. I already rode it. Everything's good. Shifts like butter. And I went ahead and pulled the shift lever out of the primary and cleaned the rust off of it and re-greased it just to be sure. But little things like that. Fork oil. That's another one. You tell somebody they got to change fork oil, and you're like, oh man. Well, think about it. It only holds 8 ounces, and every time you ride the bike, they're moving up and down. And it does wear. It does wear out. So do your fork oil. A lot of times the cupping on the front tire that you get is because the rebound on the front end isn't right, because fork oil is worn out. So you change that around and change the fork oil out, and good to go. But tire pressure. I've had guys bring bikes in, and they'll have like 10 pounds of air in the front tire, 10 pounds in the back, and swap it out. So check your bolts, muffler bolts. exhaust bolts come loose. What I like to do when I'm doing a full service, I start on one side. I'll start at the left front of the bike and go all the way around the front end and come down the right side all the way and then back up the left side with wrenches and a torque wrench and some sockets, and just throwing a wrench on everything and checking it. Now, granted, I haven't worked in a dealership for the past, well, ever since I had a stroke, so at least the past 7-8 years. But, you know, I don't know how they do things now, but, you know, be vigilant about going around your bike and checking it. If something doesn't work, fix it. You know, the big one is, especially on baggers and softails, the turn signal bar in the back on the fender. Always just walk by. I see a bike sitting there, I'll walk by and grab it and see if I can move it. You know, they shouldn't move. If it moves at all, it's loose, and it'll end up cracking the fender. And sometimes I've seen them where it actually breaks the fender and the turn signal bar's hanging down, banging on stuff. I mean, it'll just rip holes right out of the fender because it's been loose that long. Things like that. Handlebar bushings being loose. If you can move the bars a lot, probably take them out and put new polyurethane bushings in there, tighten them up. Wheel bearings, that's a big one. Had a guy one time that'd been to like 3 different dealerships. He had a 99 FLHT. Funny guy. And brings the bike in. He's like, man, my bike's got a wobble at like 103 miles an hour. Okay. We'll look at it. You know, took it, jacked front end up, and tire looked fine. Brakes were fine. I think we changed the fork oil in it and took it out and rode it, and it was fine. Didn't really feel anything. And you know, you got to question people. So I'm asking the guy, I'm like, when you're riding this bike, is it when you're around trucks or in traffic or anything? Nope, it can be all by itself, all by my lonesome. No wind. It's like exactly at 103 miles an hour. He said, man, I took it 2 or 3 different places, and each one of them said it needed a front tire, so put a front tire on there. So I ended up, I'm sitting there, and I jacked the bike up, and I'm feeling the wheel, and I don't feel anything really weird in the wheel bearings. Pulled the front wheel off, and you couldn't feel it on the bike, but, you know, stuck my finger in the wheel, kind of holding it up between my fingers like that and rolling it, and I could feel a notch in the left-hand bearing. Just ever so slight, but ended up putting wheel bearings in it, and guy was fine. He's like, man, bike ain't never rode so good. So, you know, just check things over, check your wheel bearings. Now, I used to live in a state where the state inspection was pretty stringent. They had you had to jack the bike up, you had to take tire readings, you know, with depth gauge. You had to jack the bike up, feel the wheel bearings, feel the swing arm bearings. Same thing with the front. You jack the front end up, you feel the steering head bearings, you feel the wheel bearings. You had to measure the brake rotor thickness, measure the brake pad thickness, and write it down. Same with the front. Bars couldn't be so high above the seat, more than 16 inches, I think. Lights couldn't be lower than 16 inches off the ground or higher than 36. A lot of different stuff. But anyway, I'm rambling, so you get my point. Just go around, check things over. The little rubber bushings that hold the battery box onto the oil tank. You know, feel as if you can move that battery box around, you probably need new bushings. On the earlier Sportsters that didn't use the bushings, where the battery box was just mounted directly to the oil tank with no bushings, oil tanks tended to break on one of the welded on brackets at the back. So if you got an oil leak that you can't really explain. A lot of times it's leaking directly out of the oil tank, where one of the brackets is welded onto the back of it. That's enough of that. I'm just ranting on here. Belt alignment. You've got a little hole in the swing arm here, like right here, and there's one on the other side. Now to check the alignment on those, you just take a piece of welding rod and bend it at a 90-degree angle. I put a little O-ring on there and measure to the center of the axle on this side. And then go around the other side and take a measurement on that side and then make sure they're equal. Another thing that I see quite a bit that people do, they'll take this axle nut and they'll use an impact on it. And you can usually tell that washer that's back there, if that washer's crushed at all, they've over torqued it. And what it does is you can actually, depending on how much ooga dooga you put on there, you can crush the center spacer in the wheel behind the bearings. So you're actually loading the bearings, side loading the bearings, kind of crushing them so they don't have the same end play. And it'll wear the wheel bearings out. Not only that, I haven't seen it much on a Sportster, but on baggers with 3/4 inch axle, the axle will crack. The swing arm will crack, like right here in the center where the axle goes through. And you can look at it and see where the axle will be smashed from somebody or the swing arm will be smashed from somebody using an impact to tighten it. And it crushes the swing arm, and it causes a stress riser, and that's where they end up cracking. See plenty of them like that. In fact, I worked with a guy that religiously used an impact on the damn axles, and I told him time and time again, you know, you're wrong, man. You're gonna kill somebody like that. Now, he didn't kill anybody, but he did cause somebody to wreck because he'd been working on this guy's bike for years, and the guy liked him for working on his bike or whatever, but it cracked his swing arm on the left side, right there on the left side, right where the axle goes through. You know, and I looked at it because the guy wrecked. Him and his girlfriend were on there, and they wrecked. And I took the bike and looked at it, and yeah, the swing arm's cracked. I can tell you why it's cracked. It's cracked from using a damn impact on it. You know, I didn't tell the guy that. I told my boss that. You know, of course, the insurance is going to have to pay for it, any hospital bills and the bike and whatever else. But it cracked. And seen a bunch of them like that, over torquing. You know, these 3/4 inch axles only take 50 pounds of torque. 50 or 60, you don't need to put 100 pounds of torque on them. But that's it for that. I'm just ranting now, so that's it. You guys take care. Check your bikes out. Whether you take them to the dealer or if you do it yourself, you know, you still need to go around it, not just change the oil, but go around it. You know, lube your cables, lube your clutch cable, lube your throttle cables. Check your charging system. Check your batteries. Check all your fasteners, your fender bolts, your swing arm. If you have a bike that you've never done one on, you know, your bike's a little bit older, you might need to go ahead and, while you got the wheel off the next time, pull the pivot shaft out of the swing arm and pull the bearings out and give the bearings a little bit of grease. And lube the hell out of the axle shaft or pivot shaft. And that's it. I'm done now. It's time to go in the house. If you like my content, please like, share, subscribe, comment, all that jazz, and take care. See you guys later.